All right, everyone. The governor of Vermont, Phil Scott, who I have 10 bones to pick with, I think, at this point, he is a Republican. He's part of the GOP, but he's beyond even like a Murkowski or a Romney. He's sort of like the Democrats have Joe Manchin, the Republicans have Mitt Romney, and they're people who are out of lockstep, certainly with the executive level sort of politics of their parties. And so Phil Scott, link in the description if you want to see it, decided to unleash a tweet storm when Ginsburg dies. And he's like, well, we need to delay a replacement till after the election. We need decorum. And it's like decorum. My goodness, the Democrats have no place to complain about decorum, and neither, by the way, does Phil Scott. This man was elected in part, and I voted for him at the time in part, because his opponent, Sue Minter, was a Bloomberg far-left Democrat that mainly was focused on wanting to bring New York City-style gun control to the state of Vermont, a state that by and large has no gun crime problem, is exceedingly rural, in which people hunt, number one, they do sports shooting, number two, and number three, there's just a general lot of outdoor recreation. If you go off into the woods, it's a good idea to have a firearm on you. While it's rare, you might be attacked by a rabid animal. Occasionally a bear stumbles out of the woods and might, decide to take a swipe. Although I don't think that's happened since the 1970s. Normally it's the bear got trapped in someone's garage eating their trash, and grandma walks out. I remember in the 90s there was a case where an old woman got mauled by a bear who was trying to escape her garage, and it busted down the screen door and everything. It's a good idea. It's also perfectly legal. It's protected under the Second Amendment. Phil Scott got in partially because Sue Minter was rejected on the basis that too many rural Vermonters, including many liberal Vermonters, voted against her because she said, oh, well, I want to ban all the weapons. Oh my God, guns are so terrible. Not understanding, Sue, there was never a gun crime problem in the state of Vermont. Phil Scott then, only a year later, decided to cuck completely and bring forth 90% of the same proposals. They were almost verbatim copies of what was voted against. The only thing that he redacted from it was an attempt to ban assault weapons. The Democrats, who run the House and Senate in Vermont with a supermajority, which is why he's doing this, of course faulted him for that. Phil Scott is a complete waste, a complete sellout. He brings forth a bill not that many weeks ago. Well, I want to free up $2 million in subsidies for illegal immigrants in the state of Vermont to give them a stimulus. It should be illegal. I would assume that it already is under U.S. law. If someone is here illegally, they should be, by our laws, they should be processed and deported, Phil. Instead, the Democrats in the Senate and House, they're like, oh, that's a good start. We're going to make it $5 million. He'll probably be in favor of that. So, Vermont taxpayers like me now have to literally subsidize people who are violating federal and state law and residing in the state illegally. Why? I can't even tell you. I don't even fucking know at this point. Phil Scott whines about replacing Ginsburg. Let me explain a few fundamental differences between this and the Garland controversy at the end of Obama's administration. Number one, the Senate was controlled by the opposite party back in 2016. The Republicans narrowly controlled the Senate then. The president, Obama, was a Democrat. He wanted to replace Scalia with a left-wing justice, which would have radically altered the composition of the court. The Republicans said, we don't want to deal with 20 years of bad SCOTUS decisions. That's not happening. They had the votes, number one. And number two, if you look at the situation, it's not quite the same as it is now anyway. Merrick Garland was brought up for a vote. They did. They followed normal procedure. They shot him down before the election. And then, of course, it gets tabled. Obama's nominee was defeated with due process. Was spoken of glowingly by Obama and the Dems, of course was derided by the Republicans. They hold a vote, and lo and behold, the Republican-controlled Senate voted no. Wow. So they did their job. In fact, they were goaded on to hold a vote. Well, they did. They defeated the idea. The Republicans control the Senate now. The opposite party is not the one optioning the potential SCOTUS replacement. I find it funny because if this were a situation where the Democrats held the executive branch, would Phil Scott have said this? Oh, well, we've got to wait till after the election. I don't know that he would have. He's a never-Trumper. He's just got Trump derangement syndrome, and I can tell you why. Because Phil Scott's not a moron. He's not dumb. He's just evil. He realizes that he's governor of a state that is, by and large, exceptionally blue. It's 60-40 in favor of the Democrats. There is a Democratic supermajority in, I believe, both the House and the Senate, in both chambers. They can really fuck with Phil Scott if they want to. because he's from the other party. But as long as he just keeps his head down and acts the typical role of a Vermont Republican, which is to be basically just nothing more than an occasional veto stopgap against the most draconian legislation that you think won't pass over your head anyway, he can keep his job. He can keep his money. He can keep his happy position. Maybe he can be a 3-term governor, which, by the way, is rare in Vermont. Usually we switch him up every other year. That's what he wants. He's in it for, I guess, the fame or something like that. He's famous. Governor of the state of Vermont. Most people can't even find us on a fucking map, dude. From New York City to Boston, they think that it's a stretch of wasteland. From Montreal down to New York City, in that general area, there's nothing. Abandon ye all hope. You know, you hear sounds of banjos. Run in the other direction. That's what people think of our state, other than skiing and maple syrup, Phil. It's not really that important now, is it? Why do you have to cuck on literally every issue? You pass mask mandates and draconian restrictions on businesses for a state that has the lowest case totals in the country for COVID. You pass sweeping gun control. You try your best to convince your own political party not to take the mandate that voters gave it by giving it a Senate majority of 53 seats, not take advantage of the fact that they have the Senate and the executive branch to get rid of far leftism on SCOTUS in order to shoot down. What is this about? I think I know what it might be. Phil Scott's gun control is unconstitutional. And it is Phil Scott's plan. He lifted it from Sue Minter, but all of the provisions there are unconstitutional. The idea of denying the sale of a firearm to someone who is a due citizen who has achieved the age of 18 because they're not 21 is blatantly unconstitutional. Red flag laws, pre-crime, is blatantly unconstitutional. Bans on magazines of certain sizes have been ruled unconstitutional even by the Ninth Circuit fairly recently. Phil Scott's probably worried that one of his pieces of signature legislation, as though the Vermont governor's signature legislation usually amounts to jack shit, will be torn apart by SCOTUS. Good! I hope that it is, and I'm gonna laugh. I'll have custom shirts made celebrating the loss of your shitty gun control, and I hope you get kicked to the curb, Phil. I hope that somebody comes along with half a brain, which is all that would be required to debate you on stage. Obviously, you're not going to get it with someone like Sue Minter. They're going to come along and they're going to kick your ass back out of politics. Don't worry too much, though, Phil. Didn't you sell your business for multiple millions of dollars? Just retire. Eat more maple syrup. Play with your BB guns, which is all Mommy will allow you to have, probably. Go to another microbrewery and do more taste testing. Be like Clinton there when he was in the whiskey factory and he got all handsy with one of the reporters there after he took a shot. Why don't you just do cringy stuff like that? At least you leave people alone and let Vermonters live their lives. We're lawful enough to own firearms. We're healthy enough not to need masks on when we go to the fucking grocery store. And we certainly don't need you basically with an R after your name proclaiming... So you're like a less famous Mitt Romney. Basically, you even talk the same. You're a rich dude. He sort of looks similar, like a boring stiff. Like a car salesman or something. It's fucking hilarious. That's about all. Peace out.